It is so good to see each one of you here today. I look out and I see this group of brothers and sisters, and it warms my heart. It is a good day, and it's not just a good day because of the good weather outside, because it's not just a good day because it's a beautiful day, but it is a good day because we can come and we can learn about God, we can give Him glory, and we can learn what God wants from us so that we can serve Him, so that we can be better Christians, be the best Christians that we can be. Jesus had a lot to say about how we act. He had a lot to say about the way that we carry ourselves. And Jesus, even though he looked at he looked at the things that people do, he was also very concerned with what was on the inside. When Jesus spoke, and they were very critical words to the Pharisees. Matthew chapter 23, He pronounced woe upon them, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. And He said, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, in verse 27, for you're like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness. Even so, ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within ye are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. So Jesus cared not just about what happened on the outside, but also what goes on inside a person, what goes on inside your thoughts. And one of the things that Jesus dealt with a lot was hypocrisy. Jesus cared about hypocrisy, and He called it out on many occasions. He used the word hypocrite a lot just in Matthew chapter 23, but in more places. And He tells us, well, what our problems are if we are hypocrites. Now, what does it mean to be a hypocrite? Well, a hypocrite is somebody who portrays, puts out one image, but inside is something else. It's a facade then that they put up for everybody to see. And the hypocrite is, well, there's several problems with being a hypocrite. Now, Jesus wasn't rebuking people who get up on stage, like the word hypocrite, which originally was referring to a stage actor, somebody who puts on a mask so that they could play another character. He wasn't rebuking them, but He was rebuking people who would put on a mask mostly to appear good when they were hiding something that was evil and not dealing with that. Well, can that happen to us today? Can we be hypocrites? I dare say if there are going to be any hypocrites, they would be in a place like this. And I have heard a lot of non-religious people make the complaint about the church in general, not this church or that church, but the church in general, saying that, well, the church is just full of hypocrites. And I wonder about when people say that because, well, on one hand, yeah, there are a lot of hypocrites in the church. However, on the other hand, there are a lot of imperfect people in the church. And we are told to be holy, we are told to act holy, and we are told to try as hard as we can to be holy, yet God understands that just because we're trying our hardest to be holy, that doesn't mean that we are going to be without sin. However, nobody likes to give the impression, I think, that they are a sinner. So what do? And somebody from the outside looking in sees the problems. They look and they notice the problems. They say, look at all that hypocrisy in there. Well, let's look at some characteristics of the hypocrites. And some of these points I got from some of them, like the point number 2 or 3. I didn't make that word up. Point number 3, hypocrites are hypercritical. I didn't make that up. I don't know where I heard it, but it didn't come from me. So don't get the impression that I don't want to give the impression that I've made up all of this. I've heard a lot of preaching. But first of all, if you go to Matthew chapter 22, and you look at verses 15 and following, you'll see that hypocrites often say one thing and they mean another. Like, for example, it says the Pharisees went and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk. And they said, now look at this, they said they sent out to him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true, and teaches the way of God in truth. Neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of men. Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? And Jesus perceived their wickedness, it says, and said, Why do you tempt me, you hypocrites? Then he asks them to show them a penny, a denarius. And who asked whose image is there? Well, Caesar's. And he said, Render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, what is rightfully his, and give to God the things that are God's. But he asked in verse 18, Why do you tempt me, you hypocrites? Why do you call them hypocrites? Oh, Master, we know that the things you say are true. We know that you teach the way of God in truth. They don't believe that, do they? You may call this hypocrisy, like Jesus. You could also call it just outright lying. If you say of somebody what you don't believe, and they were trying to do it to entangle him in his talks. They wanted to capture him. They wanted him to trip on his words. They wanted to find some logical inconsistency. They didn't want to learn anything, and that's the impression that they were giving when they came to him. And he said, You're hypocrites for this. And when we speak to people, are we telling them things that we don't believe? Are we giving an impression that we think something that we don't? This is one way that we can be hypocrites. Be honest with your words. And it's not just like what Jesus said, let your yes be yes, or your yea, yea, and your nay, nay. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. That's not the only form of honesty there. Are you going to do this? Yes, I'm going to do this. Well, how else can we be honest? By speaking the things that we truly believe and the things that we truly think. Well, what happens if I think horrible things about a person? Well, I probably need to keep my mouth shut then, right? What did that little rabbit say? When he was saying bad things, his mother said, Thumper, what did your father tell you? If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. There's more though. Look at Matthew chapter 6. Because Jesus really, he addresses this, this hypocrisy. And I don't know that he uses the word in here. As I look through here, I don't see the word hypocrite, but he says, take heed that you don't do your alms, that's giving to the poor, to be seen of, before men to be seen of them. Otherwise, you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. He says, when you do your alms, do them in secret. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your Father may see in secret, verse 4, and shall reward you openly. What does a hypocrite do? A hypocrite engages in religion. That's almsgiving. A hypocrite does religion so that people can see him doing religion. Is the hypocrite being religious? Well, remember, what does God care about? He cares about what's on the inside. And our worship, all of our worship, should come from our heart, and it should be from a place of adoration for God. So what happens when I start doing things so that people will see me? What's the other one? Look at verses 16 through 18. Moreover, when you fast, he says, be not as there's the word hypocrites. Don't be like the hypocrites, he says, of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. And he talks about praying too. In Matthew 6, don't be like the hypocrites in verse 5. For they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. Hypocrites do things that are good, not because they want to please God, but because they want other people to see them doing good things. God very much cares about our motivation for doing things. Why did you do that action? Was it because you wanted to be pleasing to God? Was it because you wanted Him to see you? That's okay, isn't it? It says, do these things in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. So therefore, I can do something in secret, and I can hope that God will see me. And because He said that He would, I can know that He will reward me for that. But when I start doing things so that other people will see, oh, that's a holy person, I need to be careful about that, lest I become a hypocrite. Because just portraying holiness, just putting on the mask of holiness, does not make me holy. When you pray, he says, don't use vain repetitions like the heathens do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. I'm usually very concise when I pray, not because I'm trying to do anything, but just because I don't like beating around the bush. So sometimes when I pray for the food, I'll just say, thank you for the food. However, what happens if I get up to say a prayer and I try to be as eloquent as possible? Is there anything wrong with eloquence? No. But for the sake of eloquence, for the sake of being seen, well, that's a problem, isn't it? So I need to mind my motivations, don't I? What else do hypocrites do? Well, here's the one I said that I didn't come up with the name, and I wish I knew who was the one who said this, but I really like this. Hypocrites, or those who are hypocritical, are often hypercritical. That is, they look at other people and they say, look at what this person is doing wrong. And Jesus addresses this. He says, judge not, that ye be not judged. Oh man, if ever there were a misused passage in Scripture, it's this one, isn't it? Judge not that you be not judged. How dare that you say that homosexual Homosexuality is wrong. How dare you say that? Didn't you read where God said that you shouldn't judge lest you be judged? Honestly, if I say homosexuality is wrong and this passage applies to me, what does that mean? Well, that means I would be practicing too, wouldn't I? Because he's saying with the same judgment that you judge, you shall be judged. The problem isn't making the judgment then, is it? The problem is when you judge somebody for something that you yourself are doing, you're condemning yourself. With what measure ye meet, it shall be measured to you again. Why do you behold the speck, the mote that is in your brother's eye, but you don't consider the beam that is in your own eye? How will you say to your brother, let me pull that mote out of your own eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? A little physical comedy there. And then he says, thou hypocrite. Thou hypocrite, first cast the beam out of thine own eye, and then thou shalt see clearly to cast the mote out of thy brother's eye. Well, what is the hypocrite? The hypocrite is somebody who is looking at others and being hypercritical of them. Trying to find the problems in everybody else. Why? Because if you can show somebody else doing wrong, what are you doing? If you can point out somebody else being wrong, what are you doing to yourself and your own credit? You're building yourself up, aren't you? And a lot of people do that. They point out the flaws in everybody else so that they can seem, well, at least in their own mind, that they are better than that. And people do this to themselves. They rationalize. They say, well, at least I'm not as bad as so-and-so. I play video games for 5 hours a day, but I have a friend, he plays for 12 hours a day. Man, at least I'm not like that. That's way too much. And completely don't realize, well, there's still a problem there. Man, I stole something. Yeah, but it was just a little thing. At least I didn't kill anybody. Is that good rationalization? But people do these kinds of things all the time, right? What happens when we see our own flaws? Oftentimes, instead of addressing our own flaws, what do? We immediately look and try to find the flaws in others. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's comforting. Maybe it's comforting to know that other people are just as bad as we are, but that doesn't fix my own flaw. That doesn't fix what I have wrong. And it's, with the judgment that you judge, you shall be judged. I need to be careful when I point things out, because it's going to come right back at me. It's going to come right back at me. So hypocrites are hypercritical. The Jews had a problem with this, and Romans chapter 2 addresses that issue. Verses 21 through 23. Thou therefore which teachest another, shouldn't you teach yourself? Or it says, teachest thou not thyself? Do you not teach yourself? Thou that preachest a man should not steal, dost thou steal? Thou that sayest a man should not commit adultery, dost thou commit adultery? Thou that abhorrest idols, dost thou commit sacrilege? See, the problem with these people is they're so busy telling others what to do that they don't understand. They're doing the same thing. And when God looks at it, what does he say? Thou that makest thy boast of the law, through breaking the law, do you dishonor God? We should be careful then. We should be careful. should be careful. Jesus wasn't saying don't make any judgments. What Jesus was saying is get yourself in order before you start criticizing others. Or at least work on things. At least work on things. I don't have to have my life perfect in order to say, here's what the scriptures say about right and wrong, but I need to be trying, don't I? I need to be trying. I need to be trying my hardest. And I need to be self-aware. I need to know that the things happening in my life are there. Here are my flaws. So if I say something to you, I need to be aware of my flaws and I need to be working to fix them. And if I'm not, what right do I have? What right do I have, even if it's truth? You shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, that's probably true, right? If I say to somebody who's doing wrong, you shouldn't be doing that, I'm not lying because of that. And sometimes people make the mistake of saying, well, you're just a hypocrite, therefore I shouldn't listen to you. Well, can a hypocrite speak right things? Where does Jesus say that? He says that. He says a hypocrite can speak right things, can't he? Can't they? Look at Matthew 23. Matthew 23. The scribes and the Pharisees, he says in verse 2, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not do ye after their works, for they say and do not. Now somebody might be walking along listening to the scribes and Pharisees and understanding, yeah, I heard Jesus give a talk about that. They can't be trusted. They're hypocrites. They say things, but they don't follow the things that they say. Therefore, I'm not going to do what they say. There's a problem there, isn't there? Because the scribes and the Pharisees were teaching truth. They were teaching what was right in a lot of cases. And it says, they sit in Moses' seat. They're the religious leaders showing you what Moses wrote, the law of Moses. These are Jews now that he's talking to. The scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat and they're telling you what's right. So do what they say, not what they do. That's how we've shortened the phrase. It's a little long saying, all therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. But the phrase is now do what they say, not what they do. And you have people saying that, right? Do what I say, not what I do. The problem with that is people don't like to listen to a hypocrite. And that is a big problem. Because if I'm trying to teach people what God has to say, and people they're not listening to what I'm saying, they're going against my teaching because I'm a hypocrite and I'm not living according to the way I preach, well, that doesn't excuse them for not listening to God. And I can cause somebody else to be lost by my misdeeds. So I need to be careful when I'm critical. And only point that finger when I'm comfortable pointing those fingers back at myself. He's not saying don't do it. What he's saying is only do it if you're comfortable speaking to yourself in the same way. Because you're going to be judged just like the ones you speak to. Hypocrites often demonstrate very little compassion because they're concerned about themselves. Look at Luke chapter 13, beginning in verse 10. It says he was teaching in one of the synagogues. Behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years and was bowed together, and there was in no ways, and could in no wise lift herself up. When Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said unto her, Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. He laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. And what did the hypocrites do when they saw this amazing miracle? Did they care that this woman was cured from her pain? It says the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day, and said unto the people, There are 6 days in which men ought to work. In them, therefore, come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. First of all, is healing somebody work? I don't know about that. How much work is it to heal somebody? How much work do you think it took Jesus to say, be healed? Where in the law of Moses does it say that? If you heal somebody, don't do it on the Sabbath day. But, the Jews, the ruler of the synagogue, he just wanted to trap Jesus. He just wanted to find something that Jesus was doing wrong because, well, that's what people do. One of the reasons I've stopped reading news is because all news is look at what this person has done wrong, and look what that person has done wrong, and can't stand it. Well, the Jews were doing that 2,000 years ago to Jesus. Look what he's done. He healed somebody. He didn't do it on the right day. Oh, man. Sabbath. He broke the Sabbath day. And the Lord answered him and said, Thou hypocrite! Does not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or his donkey from the stall and lead him away to watering? And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan hath bound, these 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? Don't you care about the person? Jesus wasn't doing work on the Sabbath day. And he pointed out that they had no compassion. And the reason, why do you think hypocrites don't have compassion for others? Does it have anything to do with the fact that if we're hypocritical, then we're self-absorbed? We're worried about what other people see about us. And it's all about our image. I dare say a hypocrite might even pretend that he cared. But what does God want from us? What does he want? What does he require from us? What are the 2 great commands? Love the Lord your God with all your facade, your heart, your soul, your strength. God wants actual, genuine love. And what's the second command? It's similar to the first one, Jesus said. Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor how? This is great. Love your neighbor as yourself. What's the hypocrite doing? Building up. You're building up self. Look at how great I am. A hypocrite would probably be great at loving his neighbor if he actually loved his neighbor as himself. Man, probably too much, right? Man, if somebody who was a hypocrite could start loving his neighbor like loving himself, man, that person could do no wrong. But God expects us to be genuine. God expects our love for him. So what will we do? Will we continue to be self-absorbed, presenting a face that others can see without truly owning our own selves? Owning our own actions and then giving ourselves over to God, or are we going to make that change? What do you have in your life today that is preventing you from genuinely loving God, genuinely caring? Whatever that need is, why not make it known now? Let's stand.